Okay.
All right. Well, welcome to the special meeting of the Ferndale School Board for October 21st. I'm Andrew McLaurin, and I would normally run the meeting, but tonight I'm having a little problem with my focus. So Kevin Erickson is going to step in and take over the reins of the meeting. So Kevin, thank you for stepping in, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. So again, welcome to this Wednesday, October 21st special meeting of the Ferndale School Board. Normally we have our regular business meetings on a very predictable schedule the last Tuesday of every month, except for December when we have it the Tuesday prior to winter break beginning. In addition to those meetings, we do have these special, special meetings which aren't set up as much for public comment as are our regular meetings, but allow us to typically, the purpose of them is for learning together, digging deeper into particular topics, and addressing the issues that can't wait until our regular business meetings, and or items as far as that we want to discuss as far as our own governance. These study sessions and special meetings are not held according to a regular schedule. Rather they are called when needed on dates that fit into the board's schedule. And so they are, however, always announced, and the agendas are always published in advance according to the Open Public Meetings Law. When we're able to hold these meetings in person, many of our study sessions involve two-way conversations with the stakeholders about important topics. This current virtual setting does not lend itself well to such conversations, but I'm confident when I speak for the entire board in saying that we look forward to getting back to the in-person format where we can have those conversations. As for tonight, the first half of our special meeting will provide the board with an opportunity to discuss the reopening plans with the superintendent and members of the executive team. During the second half of our meeting, we will be talking about our own governance process as they relate to our meeting structure, our policies, and our communication with the community. We usually try to keep these meetings and study sessions to about 2 hours in length. So before we get started with tonight's agenda, I would like to invite everyone to rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So the next item, 2.01 on the agenda, is the actual adoption of the agenda. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as written, or if there are any proposed changes.
I'll move that we adopt the agenda as written.
Thank you. So it has been moved to adopt the agenda as written. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. So that takes us on to item 3.01, which is a focus on student learning and an update and discussion about the process of transitioning students back to into in-person learning. As I mentioned, one of the reasons for tonight's special meeting is to get a report on the district's efforts to start bringing students back into the classrooms for in-person learning, and also to talk about next steps in this process with the district administration. I want to mention that the board received a 22-page document with reopening guidelines prior to the meeting. So we are aware of the detailed planning that has gone, or that's been done to back up the transition from remote to in-person learning. But we're anxious to hear how the plans have worked out in practice. To start that discussion on this agenda item, I will turn the meeting over to Superintendent Quinn.
Thank you, Dr. Erickson. Yeah, it was an exciting week, the week of October 19th, in that for some little people in Ferndale, it was their first day in a classroom. And so we started the hybrid model yesterday. Wednesdays, you know, in the hybrid model, we don't have kids in person, but we had half of our developmental preschoolers, our kindergartners, our English, our most significant English language learners, and our students with the most complex IEPs back on Monday and Tuesday, and the other half we'll have on Wednesday and Thursday. As I said in my letter to you Monday night, from all accounts, there were more smiles than tears. A few tears, but more smiles than tears, and I don't think any teachers were crying. So that's always good. Just kindergarten, the first day of kindergartner is always kind of a mixed, well, it's always very special. So I'm going to call on the members of my team to give a little more in-depth about what we've been doing and what our plans are from here. So Kelly's going to talk to you a bit about elementary, preschool, and special education hybrid plan. So Kelly, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Well, it was very exciting that we have kids back in the building. Not that we haven't had our remote and safe remote access sites, but to get some of our grade levels started, as well as some of our other populations of students. It's been nice. I know that I shared with our executive team when I was taking the trash down on Monday, I saw one of our school buses on the road on Grandview, and it just made my heart happy. So, so far things have gone, I would say, very well. We did quite extensive training and preparation for staff leading up to this week. And I think that staff has done an amazing job. I've been able to be at several schools this week, and just watching them take that 22-page document that you referenced, Dr. Erickson, and do what they do best, which is just be amazing. So an example of that is we say that our kiddos need to wash their hands upon entering and exiting the classroom. And so to watch our kindergarten students on day 2 come in, go in a specific spot while they're waiting, and the teachers walked around with a spray bottle filled with the soap, where they were scrubbing their hands until their name was called to go in the classrooms, in which they were using the water at that point and washing their hands. But our staff has just done an amazing job taking so many of these requirements and just doing what they do best, right? And working with kids and making it work. And so it's been a very good first 2 days of school, but it's learning, it's relearning, learning new strategies to use. And we haven't been teachers in a pandemic with kiddos in our classrooms, or principals either. So it's taking some transition. And I will tell you, I was in a classroom and one of the kiddos told the teacher, "Oh, you're doing way better today than yesterday." So just even the kids, as we're learning the routines and the teachers are becoming more and more comfortable and confident with the routines, they're like, "Oh yeah, you've got this." And so I will say it's been a very nice start. The teachers, like I said, have been amazing. And so the developmental preschool, they are up and running, and they have their students back. Not quite as many students as they were initially anticipating, but they're continuing to reach out to families and see what we can do to support them in that transition. So that's been great, and Rebecca's been there to support that effort. And otherwise, our kindergartners our BB groups are starting their first day tomorrow. So that will be another first day experience. And then beginning on Monday, we are starting the transition of our first grade students. So that will be, first grade students are coming in on the 26th. And then on that following Monday, which is November 2nd, we'll start with our 2nd and 3rd grade students. And then November 9th will be our 4th and 5th grade students. So we're monitoring the numbers. We continue to monitor those closely. John sent an update just today as we continue to transition our populations in. Our students with complex IEPs have transitioned nicely as well. Our teachers and paraeducators are getting in routines of providing support, what that looks like, and the best way to do it. And they're also, everybody's just working really hard to meet the needs of our students and finding the best way to do that in this situation. So I would say it's been a nice transition. The teachers and administrators and nurses have been working so hard and done a really nice job to help make this transition as smooth as possible under these circumstances. So continuing to refine what we're doing, continuing to make it work best for students, which is what we do best, right? And but just really proud of these efforts. It's been a lot.
And I will remind you that we do also have provisions for students who are for families who aren't sending their kids back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from talking to colleagues around the county and the region, I think we were one of the few that actually did a lot of pre-planning to try to keep those kids together when the hybrid started, so that we didn't have to break up groups, because there is relationship building that's happening in those online groups as well, and especially between teacher and student. So those classes are continuing to function in 5 days a week of remote learning. John, I'm going to call on you next. I know I have to, one comment this morning, Heather Layton sent over some photos of her life skills class, and we posted them on Facebook. And I think within the first few hours, there were 99 comments and some controversy about the PPE that was being worn by students in life skills. Some of our staff weighed in, but we usually on those things wait and see if the community itself sort of answers itself. But some negative comments about the PPE that was being worn by the teachers in those programs. And I also know, John, there have been a number of questions about masks. So if you would talk a bit about health and safety precautions and maybe hit on PPE especially.
Sure. I think the challenge on talking about health right now is it's huge. We're using the plan that we developed this summer with tons of community and health department input. It all starts with the tracking. And so we've worked with the health department to track the number of cases, which is our primary indicator. We've talked about it at the board meetings pretty regularly. We're using the county number. There's been some questions about that this week. The reason we're using the county number is number one, it's cases per 100,000. And if we take just Ferndale, we don't have close to 100,000 people. And a family of 5 getting sick could throw that number way out of whack, and you'd have these constant ups and downs. Also, a large portion of our staff and some of our students even don't live within the Ferndale School District boundaries. Many of us shop outside of the school district boundaries. Certainly we're traveling and visiting. And so following the health department's recommendation, we use the county number as our indicator. Over the last month, that number has gone from about 71 down to about 45. So it's been a steady decline and a positive one. We're also doing attestations. We're doing those daily that ask each family and each staff member to attest to their health. We're doing that primarily electronic, and in some ways it's brilliant because it can come right to your phone. It's super easy. It's available in I think 20 different languages, something like that. So it's very good for that purpose. The challenge with it is we bought a brand new product because nobody needed this a year ago. It didn't exist. And so we were trying to get behind the first group, and we appear to be the first group. And so any hiccup that the new company has, we're experiencing. So it's been a challenge, but in the long run, we are going to be light years ahead as far as efficiency and ease for our community. So we feel good about the decision, but we certainly are going through some growing pains there. Kelly was talking about groups of students and cohorting our kids. The goal is to have the classes be with a minimum number of other kids and to be with the minimum number of adults at the same time, to not have an adult in contact with more kids than is absolutely necessary to run the operation. The cohorting for the kids is terrific. At the elementary level, really a cohort is a cohort, and we can maintain it through the day because we put systems in place. The maximum number of classes any one adult is with us 3. But by doing that, we're making it so only 2 adults are with any one class during a day. So it accomplishes that, I think, to a greater degree than we even hoped. Linda asked about masks and PPE. The best news about the masks, honestly, is we really anticipated a lot of pushback and community maybe not wanting to, and my kid shouldn't have to, and a kid can't, and we're seeing very little of that actually, almost no community pushback, and a few kids that we're having to build up that stamina. A couple kids that have some sensory disabilities are struggling with it to a degree. Our response to that is to provide additional PPE for the adults around while the student learns. And for some of the kids where there's a disability, that may not occur during the time that we have to solve that. The way the PPE works for the adults is, according to L&I guidance, the risk goes all the way from nominal, which is all of us right now. We're in a space by ourselves, and a mask isn't necessary. And then it goes to low risk, which is a typical classroom teacher that's in a room where they can maintain 6-foot distance and people can wear their mask. Goes up to medium and high, which a high risk would be something like maybe a paraeducator working in close contact with a student for extended periods of time during the day. In that circumstance, we use a higher grade mask and a face shield. If there's any sort of body fluids involved, a kid that's gonna maybe spit either voluntarily or involuntarily, then we use gowns. We have some disposable and some washable gowns. So the higher PPE goes with a higher risk, and that's what was viewed today. The picture was taken of a student working in a life skills classroom, and so the staff member working with the child had a face shield, had a mask on, had a gown, and if I remember correctly, was wearing gloves as well. All standard PPE for a high-risk situation, which is what the staff was in. Some of the comments were, I can't believe a teacher needs to wear that to teach in a classroom, which, you know, without doing some things with privacy and whatnot, it's difficult to call that out and say that isn't what we're really looking at. But if I was back in my 5th grade teaching days, I would have a cloth mask or a disposable mask on, and I would maintain my 6 feet, and that would be seen as absolutely adequate for the situation that I was in. With any questions with our PPE, we're going to the health department. We have a public health nurse that's assigned to our district, and I communicate with her on all of these questions because I wasn't an expert on COVID, and I'm still not. So I do a lot of phone calls, and I've gotten terrific support. Really, I've called at 7 in the morning. I've called at 7 at night, and I have yet to have to wait more than a few minutes for a response from the health department. They have been exceptional. We put in processes and protocols for symptom tracking, and we do a ton of that, just a ton, probably even with the small numbers, between 5 and 10 a day, where we track the symptoms of people that have a headache, that have a cough, that are coming down with something, that are feeling nauseous. we do a lot of that. We also have protocols for if somebody was to be positive. We've done very little of that. We have no known exposures at school at this time. We've had some people who have had exposures outside of work and school, and we've been very successful with that. Our nurses have worked their tails off to make this work. They are stretched, beyond stretched, trying to do this. They are doing their part and more, and cannot be more thankful for the group of folks that we have doing that. I also want to say that we're, and this is the little bit of human resource slice to this. We have 60 different staff members that have asked for some sort of accommodation. They have a risk themselves, a risk in their family, or childcare issues that COVID has made this them unable to either work in person or work at all in some cases. We've been working super hard to accommodate these people, get people in remote situations that need to be providing the appropriate leaves when that's been required. And our staff has been very communicative. Another thing I want to say, and it goes to all these safety protocols as well as the leaves, is you have not heard from our labor unions during this. You haven't seen the type of things that might show up on the news. They have been the opposite of that. They have been problem solvers. They have been collaborators. They have been a part of the team. They have been exceptional. We would not be opening and doing what we're doing if they did not have the involvement that they've had. And frankly, we wouldn't be happy about it and being successful if they had been anything other than exceptional, which is what they've been. So shout out to our nurses and shout out to our labor unions, because it's been a Herculean effort, but in my mind, super successful.
So I would stop and just ask if the board has any questions on Kelly or John, to Kelly or John.
It sounds like you've done great work. Could you just clarify what type mask we're expecting our kids to wear, versus like gaiters versus medical grade disposable versus bandana? What's the expectation?
So the requirement is that they wear a face covering. The state did not come out and define what that was. We have provided guidance in person and online on that. There's some that are better than others, and we're encouraging them, but we don't want the wrong one to be an excuse to not wear one at all. And we have both disposable and cloth masks available for any student that comes in and doesn't have a mask, and very appropriate for them, many of them in child sizes as well.
So we have gaiters are okay, Andrew.
Okay, thanks. That was a question that was posed to me. So.
We have not said that gaiters are okay.
We're trying to be clear that it's not the best, but it's acceptable, and it will do.
Melinda, did you have a?
Yeah, I have a question for Kelly. Hearing about the AA students and, that they're in the classroom and that they're with their teachers. And I was thinking as you were talking that given that, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Sometimes I've got my headset on and the microphone won't pick me up. But I was thinking that it's great we're starting with them because they haven't known a different kindergarten classroom. So, hey, they'll go along with this.
Well, when you say that though, Melinda, it was cute because one kindergartner told her principal that this was her favorite school and her principal was the best principal. So yes, absolutely.
The question though is for those BB students.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're coming Thursday and Friday, but Monday and Tuesday of this week was, I assume, the first time that they didn't have their teacher with their classroom meeting through the day and that sort of thing. So have you heard back from any of the BB students? Granted, we only have 2 days, but how did their experience go?
That's a great question, Melinda. And I have not personally had that come up with me in terms of receiving feedback, negative or positive. What I do know is that we have our leadership team that meets on a weekly basis, and there are kindergarten representatives on that team. And every week we discuss kind of pressing issues that we're working towards and resolving. And so we met with that team today, and I did not hear any concerns or questions. What we're continuing to try to figure out is how to manage both of them from a teacher's perspective. So I can do some more checking on that, but I have not heard any feedback regarding that. But that's a great question.
Melinda?
Like, I don't want to lose sight of that because that's 50% of their learning time.
Absolutely.
Even though the in-person is definitely where we want to be and what we're excited about, we can't forget that other part.
One of the things that Kelly didn't mention is that all of our principals and teachers are having parent Zooms like this before kids launch into the hybrid. So like last week, they had them for all the kindergarten families. So I think they had time to explain that. I mean, it still bears monitoring, but they met with them. So this week they're meeting with their first grade families, and they're explaining to them what's going to happen on Monday and Tuesday if you're a Thursday, Friday kid. So that's probably, I haven't attended those meetings, but I think that's probably why we haven't heard as much, they're really walking them through it, but we'll check and see how it goes.
And that's a great point, Linda, because that's absolutely the case. Like, for instance, several of the buildings are hosting their meetings this evening for their incoming first grade teachers. And it is informational regarding what to expect. The other piece is they still have their Google Classrooms that are up and running on those off days. So if, for instance, our BB kids had academic content on both Monday and Tuesday of this, as well as Wednesday, when they weren't in person, they still have academic content that's available asynchronously. And the teachers are continuing to monitor that and engage. The biggest difference would be that Zoom that Zoom time is not there. So that synchronous piece of it is not the same, but still there is the academic content that's pushed out within their Google Classroom still.
Yeah, I have all the respect for the teachers. On a human resources type of side of it, to juggle that, it's like their workload. To me, I mean, to an outsider, it seems like their workload has just ballooned. And I'm hoping that we as a district can give them all the support that they need and all the thanks, whether that comes from us as employers or the community, just realizing that it's tough. And they're doing a great job.
They are.
Melinda, I think that's an and. It comes from us as their employers and the community. We none of us can do our part alone. We all have to be fully engaged.
And Kelly, is it, as far as the AA and the BB, does that represent like half of a class, half of a kindergarten class and half of a kindergarten class? So the teacher's got her AA group and her BB group. And then are there some teachers, because I know there were some parents and families that opted for total remote, are there some teachers then that are just doing remote, or how are they divvied up that way?
So that's a little bit kind of what Linda was referencing a little bit earlier, is when we in Ferndale at the elementary level started this process, and we took the survey that our families completed in August, and that's where they gave us an intent of participation. Remember, they had the opportunity to opt into the distance learning at that time or indicate an interest in participating in hybrid when it became available. So what we did at that time is we took all of those distance learning kids and we moved them basically we assigned them to a teacher. So we identified how many distance learning kids we had. And then, as John mentioned as well, we had a number of teachers that also needed accommodations for a number of reasons. So we matched them up. But what happened is we had quite a few more students at that point. At the beginning of the year, we ended up actually with about 394 students that had indicated a preference to be on distance learning. So we ended up with, I think it was 19 total classrooms that were strictly distance learning. And so what's been really nice about this transition is we still have those kiddos in distance learning, because what we wanted to make sure we were avoiding is when we came to this point where we were coming back in classrooms, we didn't want to disrupt where we were having to move kids in and out or reassign them to a different teacher. So what's happened is those students that indicated distance learning at the beginning of the year are in those classrooms with those specific teachers. What is happening though is there is some interest from families now that we're going back. We have some families that are indicating, hey, I'd like to be a part of the hybrid. I'd like my kiddo to do that, or the opposite. We're not quite ready. We would like to be considered to be part of the hybrid. So there has been a little bit of movement back and forth with those, but our teachers have done a fantastic job of managing that. So right now we have those students assigned to their hybrid teachers. They started that way at the beginning of the year, and they've maintained those assignments right now. So.
Okay.
Question. I'm not sure if it's related to now, and if it's something they're going to talk about later, let's later. On, I think it was Facebook, either yesterday or the day before, there was something about a jumpstart kindergarten in January. What's that about?
So that's been our traditional Jumpstart Kindergarten that we have started. And so what we've done, the first year we ran it, we did it, I think it was starting after spring break. Last year we started it in January. Right now we're trying to figure out if we have enough community interest to be able to provide and support it again. So right now that's what we're hoping.
And those would be kids, those would be kids that would be starting
the following
next
year.
September, but wanted a jump start for next September.
Yes,
okay.
So we're trying to gauge.
Completely wrong.
No worries, but I appreciate that feedback. But so we're trying to gauge interest to see if there is a community interest and if we will be able to support that for that coming year.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark, a brief report on support services.
Yeah, so I'll start with technology, since that was kind of our first big obstacle, hurdle, challenge to start the year. As you all know, that we have been for, 6-7 years now, one-to-one at the middle schools and high school. This is the first year that we've actually been one-to-one K-12. So it's a completely new experience for our elementary students, schools, and teachers. And it's also the first year we've done BYOD. So we've talked for a long time about the students having the option to basically bring their own device, use their own computer device, but we've never actually implemented it. This year, in order to make sure we had enough devices to hand out K-12, we actually implemented the bring your own device model for the first time. So there was a lot of changes in technology to try to support the new or the current style of education that we're faced with right now. So we actually issued this fall, we handed out 3,724 devices, give or take a few here or there, within a week. The week before school started. 404 of those were for staff, and 3,320 were for students. About half of the students had never had a device issued to them before. So, there's been quite a bit of talk about, giving credit to teachers so far. I am in awe of their ability to not only completely change their practice, but also become technology experts in the meantime as well. So they became tech support, as well as trying to learn how to use the technology and deliver instruction in a completely new world at the same time. So we, this fall, also converted multiples of hundreds of Zoom licenses from the state account to our own district account, which came with new features and capabilities than what the staff had previously had. So again, a huge learning curve for staff to be able to take that challenge on and implement. And we're still working through a few issues here and there, but it's gone from the beginning of kind of mid-September, dealing with 20 or so Zoom issues a day. I think I had 2 today. So it's huge transformation change there. We brought in a temporary staff member to help with the volume. So Katie Nardi was brought in on a subcontract. She did a long-term sub at an elementary school for us last year. She was brought in to basically man help support, help desk support for the applications. So Canvas and Google Classroom and Zoom, those sorts of things. So she was taking calls directly from staff members and parents and students that were having application questions. So while Sitel was dealing with the hardware issues, she was actually helping people work through the software. And her call volume has decreased dramatically over the course of this last week as well. So that was a huge help to have her on board. We have our 700 new Chromebooks have arrived after delays and challenges through getting here through fires in California and trucking accidents. So we actually had an accident with the Chromebooks while they were on the truck. We're worried that we were going to lose a bunch of them to damage, but we did not. So that was a huge bonus. So we are now in the process of being able to swap out devices. So the devices that were a little bit questionable that we brought in kind of off the surplus pile, the Elite books that were 6, 7 years old, to get us kind of over the hump in September. We are now swapping those out for Chromebooks. So anybody that has an issue with a device, we can quickly get that back up and running. We have also issued approximately 218 hotspots to families. And I say approximately because some have been issued and returned because people have come up with other internet issues as we work through with our providers. The county has been working hard to make deals with local internet providers, and so has OSPI. So the state has finally got their contracts worked out with Ziply, Comcast, and Presidio. So we will be pushing more information out to families here later this week, tomorrow and Friday, that provides some options for folks that qualify for free and reduced lunch and don't have internet access. There are some tools out there that may provide them the ability to get broadband for no or very little cost. So we're excited to be able to get that information out finally to folks. So technology, kind of like I said, that was the big hot issue right off the bat. Tech office hours are helping. So we now at every building has a published regular hours when the techs from Sitel are actually there and available to take care of any issues that come up. The phone lines are slowing down. So we're kind of, things seem a lot better in tech world, and it's really quite remarkable actually, considering the volume of devices and the number of new applications and the new people that are using devices that have ever had before, that were actually functioning at a pretty high level. So kudos to the staff that have made that work. So food service is kind of the steady player here. They kind of were able to pick up and roll with the model that they had created last year. Yvonne and Holly really got organized and were able to kind of make some minor changes and put together a pretty good program. They have handed out over in September, they handed out 3,400 boxes of food. Those were 10 meal boxes. So that's over 35,000 meals that they provided. And 1,792 of those were in-person breakfast and lunch meals that they provided to the students that were attending the safe remote access sites. So not only were they doing the 10 meal boxes for the remote students, but they were also providing on-site breakfast and lunch for the students who were attending the remote access site. And they were doing it with 3 fewer staff. We had 1 retiree that we did not replace, 1 staff member that's on leave, and we actually transitioned 1 staff member to provide translation services as opposed to food service. They were able to absorb those hours and provide some translation, which worked out really well for everybody. The good news also, the USDA has extended the waiver that provides free food for all of our students, 18 and under, through the end of the year. So we're able to provide meals to everybody through the end of the school year. And some of the parent feedback that we've had so far has been very positive around the food service. I was talking to one parent today, and they said, the way the boxes are packaged with the food, you can tell that people care a lot of care went into it. And they were very excited about the homemade spaghetti, and the fact that that school lunch or breakfast provides a little slice of normalcy for the kids as a normal part of the school day for those kids that are doing remote learning. So those meal boxes are pretty well received and doing a lot of good. So the other kind of the new challenge area that we're facing right now is transportation. So as we're spinning up the transportation, we started with the safe remote access sites running on the first day of school. We started with 6 buses, and that first day we transported 39 students to the safe remote access sites. The last day of September, we were up to 205 students that we were transporting on a daily basis to the remote access. We then, as we transitioned to this last Monday with the AA part of hybrid, we went from 6 routes to 14, and we went basically 7 basic ed buses and 7 special ed buses and 270 students on the first day of the hybrid.
Mark, your microphone is fading a bit.
I'm sorry, how is that better?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. I have a little bit of internet spottiness, so hopefully that's, the challenge with transportation is right now we're in a period of calling drivers back in, because as you know, we've laid off all the drivers, including dispatchers. So we're creating routes, getting things started back up. So everybody's driving a route that they have not driven before. They're new routes. Every bus basically has 3 different routes that we have to create. So we have the SRAS routes that were existing and that run on Wednesdays. We've got the AA routes on Monday and Tuesday, and we've got the BB routes on Thursday and Friday. And as we start bringing more kids back in, those routes change, constantly. So during the safe remote access, when that was all we were doing, we were changing routes twice a week. So as students signed up for those, twice a week we would actually issue new routes. And it's you can imagine as a parent trying to get your day organized and get your kid ready for the bus, having that route change constantly is quite a bit of a challenge. So we are trying now to actually, as we're planning to phase back in, the entire elementary school over the course of the next several weeks, we're trying to minimize those impacts. We're trying to minimize those changes. So what we're doing is we're actually creating routes, K-12 routes that run one time. So instead of having an elementary run and a secondary run, like we have done in years past, we have one bus run that is K-12, but we're going to create more bus runs than we need actually probably for the first week or two, but to try to create that stability. So we're going to build the routes that we will have at the end in order to create that lack of changing constantly every time we bring a grade level back, or having a different route time. You have a different route on Monday than you do on Wednesday than you do on Thursday. What will happen though, just because of the nature of it, the windows that your stop, that the bus is going to be at your stop will be a little wider. So instead of in years past where we maybe would give you a 5 or 10 minute window, your bus is going to be there between 7:50 and 8. It's going to be there between 7:50 and 8:05 or 8:10, right? And just because of the nature of the variability of the kids that are getting picked up on Mondays are different than the kids that are getting picked up on Thursdays. And it's going to change from kindergarten to kindergarten first grade to kindergarten first grade, second, third grade. So we're hoping it'll normalize a little bit and parents will get a little better feel for it. But in order to, we're not going to be able to pinpoint it quite as closely as we have in the past, just because of the nature of the way we're changing right now. And over the course of the next month, it's gonna be a constant change. So we're trying to do the best we can with that, but it's going to vary a little bit for a while. So we are, Thursday, tomorrow, we're picking up the BB kids for the first time. So it's a new system. So we are expecting it's going to go smoother. It's going to run better on Thursday than it did on Monday. And we are feeling confident that we will be able to have a better run on next Monday with the first grade than we did last Monday with the kindergarten as well. There were definitely some hiccups, some challenges. We learned some things. We've got some processes in place that we think are going to streamline that system. So we are feeling pretty confident that it's going to be a better experience going forward than it was for folks on Monday.
Thanks, Mark. Does the board have questions for Mark?
First, wow. I don't know when anybody is sleeping. That's incredible. Are we finding any change in our free and reduced lunch number with the internet offer and the food? And I know everybody's can have the food at this point, but that internet piece, so how's that playing out?
The internet piece, we'll see how it plays out. I hate to say it, I'm a little skeptical of the way they've got the system set up. For those families that have not had internet in the past, if they don't have anything right now, it's tremendous. It is absolutely phenomenal, and they should sign up immediately. If you have internet currently, or it's the number of people it applies to is fairly limited because of the way that the parameters of the program. I would absolutely encourage everybody in the world to apply for it, and hopefully they get approved. And I hope that works, and we will do everything we can to get them. But it's a little restrictive on who qualifies. One of our major concerns, our biggest concerns actually, is getting people to turn in their free and reduced applications, because there are implications across the district and a lot of different funding sources other than just the free lunch. So our lab funding, our title funding, huge implications around that free and reduced application. So we've got to figure out how to get people to turn those applications in, even though they don't need them for the actual meals themselves this year.
Thank you. Good luck with that.
Thanks.
Question about the lunches. You said that they extended it from the end of this calendar year to the end of the school year?
Correct.
USDA or
Yeah.
USDA, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
USDA.
So is that funded through federal funds, or does that come out of our state funds? What does that come out of?
It's a federally funded program, a federally nutrition program. Yeah, that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the parents,
I was sure it wasn't some mandate that didn't come with any funding.
No,
No.
I was actually, I was speaking with a mom today, and she was extremely appreciative. Never qualified for free and reduced lunch before, probably borderline now. But her husband lost their job because of the COVID, and it has made a huge difference for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the last but not least, I'm going to call on Faye. Talk to us a little bit about the safe remote sites and what we're planning, still in the draft form, but what we're planning and talking to our leadership teams about for secondary.
Yep, thanks. As you know, we've been operating the safe remote access sites from the first day of school. And like Mark said, it has just grown from just a few kids the first couple of days to a significant number of students accessing now to really gain access to their education. And one of the things that we, realize with equity is that access doesn't always mean the same thing to every student. So for our students who are English language learners, their access isn't necessarily just internet connection, it's actually getting access to be able to get into their learning and into their programs, because language such as password, login, URLs, go here, Zoom here, isn't in students who are first learning English. It's not in their hello, how are you vocabulary. So we've been providing access in all sorts of different ways for students who need access to be able to do their work, because they have no other options for childcare, as well as the kids that we know of that need that connection for internet, that they just can't get internet. Even with a hotspot, it doesn't work for them where they live. So even with our elementary schools transitioning to the hybrid model, we are still offering the safe remote access sites at all of our buildings. So students are back in the home building for their safe access site, and our staffs are managing it beautifully. So it's certainly working well. Is it ideal? Absolutely not. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But they are making the best of a really, really tough situation and getting kids connected as much as we possibly can. So that's our safe sites. Our athletics program is one of the areas at the secondary level where we have been able to figure out the cohorting and small group size piece. That we really struggle with, as I've shared before about secondary. You can cohort your first period class, but then kids go off in so many different tracks, so many different pathways, so many different levels. And when you look at all the CTE offerings at the high school, very, very, very few students have the exact same schedule. So cohorting first period is great, but then by second period, your cohorts are all mixed up, and teachers will be crossing multiple, interacting with multiple numbers of students on a daily and weekly basis, which just doesn't meet the health and safety requirements. So our athletics, we are bringing in small groups. We're thinking of it like being on summer practice schedule, where coaches are allowed to practice with their players. And that continues through December 18, but not all of our sports and activities are practicing at this time. Coaches are also volunteering their time at this point. They're not getting paid for their regular coaching contract. It's completely voluntary. And not all of our coaches are available because of their other commitments. But we're looking at 2 to 3 week sessions where we split up the activities available for students. We comply with all of the WIAA as well as the Department of Health and CDC guidelines, but we're cohorting athletes in small groups during practice, so they won't be competing with other teams. They really won't be competing. It's having to look at how we do athletics very differently, with social distancing, limited use of facilities, just practicing a couple of times a week, really to get that social connection through their sport, and really going in moderation, because obviously you've got to follow the social distancing and guidelines for keeping people safe. Any questions about athletics?
Faye, I would also add that drama is also doing something similar.
My son had me sign.
I don't think you
said something for DECA today. Are other clubs as well?
Yeah, they're starting other clubs. Probably not music, because it's still one of those in-person activities that is not recommended. But yeah, drama, they're going to start getting back together with small cohorts and try to figure out how to do some kind of performance, and some of the other clubs. Though, some people would say, how can you do clubs and athletics when you can't do classes? Because that's where we can figure out how to meet the safety guidelines. And what I'm hearing from kids and parents is kids just need to get back into some kind of activities too. Even the ones who are doing well with their online classes. So we're doing where we can do it, we're doing it.
Linda or Faye, I think it might be beneficial. There may be people who either are watching now or watching this later who may not understand that cohort concept and how that fits into things. So maybe if you could just elaborate briefly on that.
Sure. It just means to try to keep the same group together all the time, and keep the group small enough. So like at elementary, those AA kids are a cohort. They don't mix with any other kid, and mainly is so if there is some infection, you haven't infected everyone. You've just been able to keep it in a pretty small circle. So with like our athletes, they're talking about bringing back a small group of them on different days. So only those kids in that, if something happens, we haven't infected the whole school. But what Faye talks about cohorting with classes, if you have 6 periods a day in middle school, you go to first period, then you go to second period with a whole different group of kids. And by the time you get to the end of the day, if there's an outbreak, you've impacted everybody. So, or just about. So that's cohort, just a small group that can stay together for whatever they're doing. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
So is there a way then, we used to have, when athletes were struggling, they would have like their morning homework help and support. Is there a way to roll that like homework support into these cohorts?
That's the next piece we're going to talk about. Okay.
Great segue, Leanne. Yeah, we've been really working with our union leadership and our principals and our teachers to figure out how we can basically come up with that exact same model, Leanne. We've talked about we really need to continue delivering instruction online remotely through the end of the second quarter, just because we can't manage the health and safety guidelines right now in a hybrid secondary model. However, we are looking at and working out the details over the next week or two about bringing in some students to our buildings for in-person instruction in the way of small group, very targeted in-person instruction in the afternoons when they aren't scheduled for their live Zoom classes. And looking at students, like our students who have an individual educational plan, an IEP, who are in need of some real targeted instruction to support them both in meeting their IEP goals, but also in helping support them in their general education classes. We're looking at our data and trying to identify some of our general education students who really need some in-person small group targeted support in their core content areas, and also letting students themselves or their families request that they come and attend some in-person targeted instruction on an, so there's an agreement between the teachers, and so they know who's coming in and it's planned and really intentional, but making sure that we allow both students and families to request that, hey, you know, we could do with some just in-person time. I just could do with you walking me through this piece. And then I'm good for a couple of weeks, or I'm good for a week. And then we have also been exploring for the students at Ferndale High School that are involved in some of the CTE classes that are more hands-on and requires big equipment that you can't pass through Zoom, like welding or small gas engines, looking on trying to bring them in as well for small group time to work in their CTE areas so that they can get some of those skills that they just can't get behind a computer or at home. So being, again, targeting and being very intentional about how we group students in small groups, but to meet their needs. And again, trying to work to address that secondary kid need for social interaction, because that's really a critical point at the secondary level. If they just need some in-person time with their peers as well as their teachers.
You might remember that the way the secondary schedule works now, I know Melinda, you know, well, I don't, but the kids are kind of in live synchronous, we call it, learning for the first half of the day for half their classes. So they're actually on Zooms, and then the second half of the day, they're in the other classes are asynchronous, and it flip-flops. So like at the middle school, 3 days, one day, they'll have periods 1, 2, and 3 in the morning, and they'll actually be with their teachers. And then periods 4, 5, and 6 that day will be more independent work on we call it asynchronous, you know, that they can go and do. So it doesn't mean teachers aren't working in the afternoon. So once again, just like we talked about how we're going to put more, this is going to put more on teachers. It does mean that in the afternoons, teachers aren't leading Zooms. And so what the details we have to work out is how we can create a manageable schedule where they can have some tutoring, mentoring, small group instruction time in those afternoons. And we, like Faye said, we want to target, but we also want to leave it open for self-referrals and family referrals. It'll have to be by an appointment, but the kid who says, I just need to see my science teacher, I just got to come in for some time, can refer themselves, even if they're doing okay. So even if we look at the data and it says, oh, you're getting a B, well, I want to get an A, and I just think if I could come in. And so anyway, we're working on those plans, and we're looking at November start time. So, but I think it is safe to say, and I think this is true across the region, because I was on a superintendent's meeting today, that the majority of secondary education will be delivered through a distance learning model in second quarter. We're still hopeful for after the holidays, but we're working on these different ways to support that.
A comment and then a question. I think it's good that we're considering that in-person option, or, that self-referral, because I know that with one of my kids, even at college, that ability to go in and talk to the teacher or the professor in that case, really helps them feel more confident about what they're doing. So kudos for doing that. Secondly, with bringing in these small groups, have we looked at the transportation issue, or is that going to have to be a self-provided, or, I'm assuming we've looked at that as well, and that, one benefit creates another challenge. And so,
That's one of the bigger ones, but yes, we are thinking about whether or not we just can't make it come if you can get your own ride. That just can't. But so we haven't even talked to Mark about all of this yet, but whether or not some sort of modified activity run midday or something, we say all the time, it's impossible. So now we have to do it, and we'll just now we have to figure out how to do it. So yes, Kevin, that is actually probably the biggest obstacle to some of the plans that we've had. We probably, transportation.
Yeah.
So
Mark will figure it out. He's a whiz with that stuff.
yeah. So that is a summary of where we are and where we think we're going in second quarter. Are there other questions or things you think we need to be thinking about that maybe we haven't talked about here?
I think when Faye said bringing in CTE students because large machines and you can't do some certain things on Zoom and such, I totally agree with that. Absolutely, 100%. But then I'm starting to think well, those CTE students are also in, an English class or a math class, and maybe a foreign language is a lot easier to learn if you're in the same room talking with somebody. And so it's just snowballs into, at what point are we doing what we can, but at the other point, if you're taking in CTE students because you have to keep people cohorted, well, then you can't bring in these other students, and it's just, but then I was going to keep my mouth shut because I have no ideas how to do it. So that's just mom speaking. I'm just that's my mom.
And it won't be perfect cohorting, but it'll be cohorting by the day. Yeah. So if we have we can do more with it at the secondary level. Keeping this, it won't be perfect, but I think in talking to other schools and districts, everything would be better in person. I mean, everything, for most people, almost everything would be better in person, but some things are just really, really hard to deliver online. Mm-hmm. And so that's some of the things that we're looking at.
Other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Linda, executive team. I know you guys are, working to solve the impossible. It's great to have kids back in, even though small numbers, back into school. It was interesting listening to one of my coworkers just this last week who mentioned how much you forget the things you're missing during the time like this. And she had ran home at lunch and went by one of the schools in Linden, and to hear the kids out laughing, giggling, playing on the playground, how much that, was hey, there's some normalcy in life. And those are always good things, and they can, we need to grab hold and appreciate those. So
when Kelly said something about seeing a school bus out when she was taking out her garbage, I was on a morning run a few weeks ago. It was one of the remote access school buses, and I saw it and I started crying. I was just like, oh, holy moly, thank you. Gave them a big heart as I'm running by. It's very emotional to see a school bus these days.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, and our sincere thanks to the myriad of district employees. You know, we've mentioned, you know, the teachers, the paraeducators, the lunch workers, the bus drivers, the custodians, the tech support, the list goes on and on of all the people that are working to help make this possible. So on behalf of the school board, thank you to all of them.
And Kevin, don't forget the parents.
Exactly. The parents are doing
parents are working so hard.
yeah. The appreciation and cooperation and understanding of the parents who are trying to juggle their kiddos with school and their work lives and every other stress they have, you know, there's a lot to juggle there. So kudos to everybody.
And the flexibility of the students themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're going through a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly by pulling all together and all of us working together and putting our heads towards solutions, that it really helps. You know, that's where community is important. So, and thank you for this presentation, because it does give us the answers and some information, so when community members are talking to us, we can answer them better. So thank you. So at this point, we're going to move on to item 4.01, which is the discussion about resuming in-person meetings, especially in regards to ways to encourage public engagement. We just got done talking about getting kiddos back into school and together. This next item is a discussion about our school board meetings and how we can transition back to meeting in person in a way that encourages public engagement. The current governor's order suspends all in-person school board meetings through November 9th, 2020 for counties in phase 2 as defined by the state, which includes Whatcom County. Our next school board meeting falls before that November 9th deadline, but our next study session is scheduled for November 10th. So unless the governor extends the emergency rules again, we may be allowed to meet in person on that date. However, while we are still dealing with the pandemic, such an in-person meeting comes with restrictions. For instance, we probably would not be able to have a large group of public participants in the same room with us. We'd certainly need to socially distance, wear masks, those kind of things. A link to the Open Public Meetings Act, sometimes referred to as the OPMA, suspension and waiver information is included on board docs. However, for our discussion tonight, I suggest we consider what we would like to have happen with our future meetings, and then charge Linda with figuring out how much of what we want to do is possible under the state's most current rules. So I'm going to open it up to the board members for what are you folks thinking? What would you like to see happen? And then we can try to reach some sort of a direction for Linda to take as we try to figure out how to make that happen. Obviously, they're working at making the impossible happen. So, you know, sky's the limit, right?
Why not?
So yeah, in all their spare time. But
exactly.
You know, one of the great things about it, I mean, looking for positives in all of the pandemic negatives, but having our meetings in this format has greatly increased community involvement. And I think that's been really great. I mean, we've gone from averaging 2 to 3 people at a meeting to having, 40 to 50 people who are at some point viewing our meetings. We have a fair number of people on our study session tonight. So I think anything that we can do, even when we're meeting in public, to still have this be an option for our community to tune in or to watch it at a later time would be really important to continue. Mm-hmm. And I realize we can't all be on our computers in the library because of feedback issues and all sorts of things. So I'm not sure what equipment we have that would allow us to be live and be broadcast and to record our meetings. So I'll have to leave that to someone else to discuss. But I think there's been a real benefit to this format.
I think the benefit of having so many people who can watch it live is great. And Lord knows this year we had quite a few meetings at the beginning of the year that were huge, and given the pandemic, you know, we don't want to have that sort of attendance and have it end up being a super spreader event.
Yeah.
But on the same, you know, I don't like the thought of telling people you can't come either in order to prevent that sort of thing. So I don't know, I love the participation. I don't want to tell people we're going to be there, but you have to stay away.
Yeah, and I don't know that we could say that, but I think once we open up relative to people attending, there are going to have to be some health guidelines. I'm not willing to sit in a room if people aren't taking precautions.
Yeah, me
And I don't want any of us to sit in a room if people aren't willing to take precautions.
Well, and even if we did have everybody taking precautions, if we had 50 people in the Vista library and everybody's wearing masks, we still have 50 people.
Well, again, taking precautions probably is going to limit that number.
Yeah.
I mean, there are limits. I mean, just like at churches, your church may seat, 300 people, but you're not allowed to bring in more than a certain capacity. And I think we're going to have to be reasonable in that regard, that only so many people can attend, and they have to be socially distant. They have to wear masks. And when you reach that number, the door is closed, and then everybody can go online.
Do we know for phase 2 what that number is for like the Vista library?
I don't know.
I think it would just be 6 feet apart. The number we could fit in at 6 feet apart.
Well, I don't know, because like even in larger facilities, I think it's going to depend on the rules at the time, because there are larger facilities where they could socially distance and have more people, but they're restricting how many people can be in a group that meets. So I'm not sure.
Do we have the option of, at least on a temporary basis, meeting somewhere like perhaps the auditorium at the high school? I mean, that may be overkill. We maybe could do the Vista cafeteria area or something where we have more room to spread out. And/or do we have the option that we could set up a, recording of the meeting and have it being live through sort of Zoom, where we're on the board and exec people are on one camera, but there's a camera with a larger monitor that people could do public comment via Zoom? I mean, I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas, because I know that I've went in various groups and depended on size, went from Zoom meetings to in-person meetings. And I don't think there's anybody that would disagree that an in-person meeting for discussion and such is a lot easier and more effective.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that point, but I would say whatever we end up doing, we have to have some very strict guidelines. And if someone doesn't want to adhere to those guidelines, they're welcome to go home and log in on their computer.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go down that road.
I was also thinking about where do we hold the meeting? I mean, Vista Library has been our tradition, but on the other hand, we know that airflow is a big deal. And so I had a flash of us under a tent on the football field, and people could be in the stands, but in December and January, that might be a little bit chilly. So it's thinking outside the box if indeed we are required to begin to meet in person again. And when that OPMA, who knows if it'll be dropped at that point or be extended again.
Yeah.
If it's a question of you can, but you don't have to, does this board want to meet in person, or would you prefer to go with this format as long as it's allowable?
I prefer this format.
Okay. It's just if we can't do this, then we would, okay.
I just think there's enough people that are, you know, school board member or admin or, you know, student school board member or whatever. We already have 11 people here and we're missing a few tonight. And so then there's not room for public. And if you have us in person, but the public, I just think everybody remote is better than a mishmash. I don't know.
Okay. Well, that OPMA has been extended many times. So, but I thought we should probably, and I think you guys brought it up too. Andrew, to get back to your idea, I think we did decide that we're going to try to record meetings when we are back in person.
Right.
And either live stream them or, well, live stream them. That's what I think we decided. And then also record them to post later. Mark and I will just have to figure out how that's going to happen, because you're right, it can't be through this format.
Mhm.
I think we can solve. That doesn't seem like an unsolvable problem. We just have to figure it out. It might require some equipment.
Okay.
Well, I hope they extend the requirement, or the, what's it called? The
OPMA.
OPMA
OPMAs,
suspension.
so that we can stay in this format for a while, because I think really your hands are full, all of you on the admin team, your hands are quite full just getting the kids back in school, but you always seem to pull it off. But in any case, I'm hoping we don't have to deal with this in the immediate future.
Yeah. Okay.
So does that give you enough guidance, Linda? It sounds like
Yeah.
we definitely want to continue recording, you know, despite when we go back to live meetings, and want to make sure we're following guidelines and making sure it's safe for everyone.
Yeah. We'll have to just be planning for November 10th to go in either way, depending on if there's since the current suspension of OPMA runs out at midnight on November 9th.
Mhm.
So, and hopefully they'll give us a little bit of notice. And Leanne, you might be the first to hear, so let me know if you hear about an extension. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. So that takes us on to item 4.02 of the agenda, a discussion about building school board outreach to stakeholders. This item is somewhat related to the previous one. The school board has committed in both its strategic commitments and its governance policies to work with, not just for the members of the Ferndale community, to provide the best education possible for all the community's children. Doing so requires a proactive outreach plan. We have reserved some time tonight on the agenda to talk about ways that we can build our outreach to stakeholders both during the pandemic and afterwards. At this time, I'd like to open up the discussion on outreach among the board members, and please feel free, executive team, to join in with as far as insights and observations of how we can increase that engagement of our stakeholders. I guess I'll start out the conversation. I think, you know, the pandemic has forced us to kind of think outside the box and do things differently. It's looking like the levy forums and informational meetings that we had, as Linda has mentioned in her updates, you know, really did tend to reach out. People shared them. There were comments, you know, there was feedback. So the use of social media in that way, I think, is something that we probably should work to continue to use. Again, I'm not looking for more tasks for people to do, you know, in the time when we've got plenty of tasks, but as we think about things moving forward, I think it's something that we should utilize. I guess I would have a question for the exec team as to how have the various language and culture meetings with non-English speaking folks been going, and what kind of interaction has that provided for the district?
Well, we did a round of 3 in August about coming back to school. We did one in Russian, one in Punjabi, and one in Spanish. The first time around, we had about 6 Russian families, about 15 Punjabi families, and about 4 dozen Spanish-speaking families. We also did one with our Lummi families. We did, just before this meeting tonight, we did we're doing another round, and we did the one with our Russian families tonight. And we only had 3 families join us tonight, but it was a good conversation. And the difference with the Russian ones, we have administrators now who speak Punjabi and Spanish. So even though I go to all of those meetings, I don't actually always know what's being said because they know the answers to the questions. So it's not a lot of, I'm there and they translate and they ask me. But the Russian ones, we have, Mark mentioned that we have a food service worker who's now our Russian interpreter, and we have a former administrative assistant who was on tonight, and they though their positions are not, they don't necessarily can't answer all the questions, so it's more of a back and forth, and it's probably a little less fluid. But we talked tonight about the transition to hybrid, and we asked what grades they had students, and they did some typing into the chat room, and I think they're good. The Spanish speaking one was huge, and we did another round that I wasn't part of when we wanted to bring our ELL students back into the schools for some support, some access. So I would say they're good. They're good. And I had a new experience the other day. We have parents who are both deaf, and they have 2 children in our system who are hearing, and they responded to one of my letters where I said, reach out to me, but we had to set up the telephone conversation, and then when I answered the phone, it was this is interpreter 5679 whatever, and it was so somebody who lived out of our area. But so anyway, we had that conversation, and one of the things they asked was whether or not we could have ASL interpreters occasionally. They said, we probably can't afford it every time, but they said they'd like to watch our every Thursday. So the last 2 Thursdays we've had ASL interpreters on our every Thursday forum. And we're getting, Kelly, Faye, do you remember, John, Mark, we're getting what, 40, 50 people every Thursday? Are we? I think it's pretty consistent. We're getting quite a few parents who are actually tuning in and watching those live.
And I've heard some positive feedback from community about those, and just being able to hear what's going on and such that way. So,
and it wouldn't be that hard if we keep doing those. I don't know if we'll do them every week, but maybe start doing them every other week. It wouldn't be that hard for 2 board members to join. And we keep those to a half hour because that really seems like long enough, especially for watching it later. But it's cheap,
Yeah.
I mean,
when we each did our levy informational thing, that sort of outreach of the school board to not just the parents, but the voters of the Ferndale School District, I think the district communication that they've been doing that we've been doing with the Thursday afternoons has been fantastic. I think you're reaching people that you haven't before. I think we're building trust. I think school board members need to also be doing that. We used to in the past, if there was the street fair, there would be a tent and some school board members would be there, or at open houses, some school board members would be there, or at the Harvest Festival, some school board members might be there. we don't have those festivals now. And so I think we really need to, as school board members, really think about how are we reaching out to voters, to people who support us, to people who don't support us. We need to have those conversations if we're going to build relationships with them, so that in the future, I mean, because this isn't the last levy we're going to ask for. This isn't the last bond, hopefully. I mean, it might be a while for a bond, but this isn't the last time we're ever going to have to bring something before them in an election. And I want to build relationships with people so that we can have discussions with them before they hear from us again on that sort of thing. Or just, you know, what do they have in mind? What do they want to talk to a school board member about?
Yeah. Well, as they say, you don't want to just go to them when you want money.
Right.
Well, and I think adding even into, you know, like you mentioned, you know, I think I can safely say that none of the school board members speak Russian, but to be there on that conversation. So if there is a question, we can respond to it through the interpreter. You know, bridging or reaching out and contacting those other groups within our district is important.
We've made a commitment to make those regular. And so by regular, every month or 6 weeks, you know, to have a regular schedule of those. One of our big pushes this year has been to be way more intentional about when we send things out, that we're working to make sure it reaches all of our families. So, and I'm sure we still have room to go, but yes, any of those things, and that's why I try to publish those dates for you. And if we do get on a regular cadence here, let you know enough in advance. But as long as it's only 1 or 2 of you, you could join any of those anytime. But I think what I hear you saying, Melinda, is some specific forums for school board members.
Joining on those once a month, but I feel like I could make a commitment in addition to the school board meeting and our study sessions to do at least one every other month. Before this all started, I had just started doing at the library. I'd go and sit in one of the library rooms for, you know, an hour and just drop by and talk to me. And I had people come and talk to me. And then COVID hit and I can't do that. So if I can tag in on, you know, some of those meetings that you're having, that'd be fantastic. I just think being out there more would be good.
And I'm wondering if it would be possible with those to be more intentional, in the sense, one of the things we talked about with as we were doing our governance and the reporting, you know, is if people knew that such and such a topic was coming up at the August meeting each year or whatever, you know, on a schedule, they were interested in that, they could show up, whether it be CTE, foreign language, aiming high, those kind of things. If we had some sort of schedule that was on the website or whatever, I mean, and again, I'm just thinking out loud, I'm not trying to create more work, but just brainstorming.
Exactly.
Then people could attend, and, you know, we might, again, it would be a targeted or intentional interaction, and allow those people so they aren't, you know, going, well, the school board's going to talk about it at the meeting somewhere on the agenda, so I got to go sit there for, you know, 2 hours or what the case may be. If there's a 30-minute, you know, we know we're going to have this interactive Facebook forum or whatever, that might be a good time to get input and contact and such.
And Lord knows those would have probably a better draw than just like, hey, there's going to be a school board member. She's got nothing to talk about, so just bring your stuff. Like, no, I'd rather
I think this goes along with what we were talking about with linkages. And, you know, we're trying to see the bright spots. So somebody said something about, we've started talking about pandemic perks. And one of the pandemic perks is that we've learned to use some tools that make us more accessible, like this. And like I say, other than time and a couple licenses, but other than time, this is a pretty inexpensive way to do outreach. So I think it's a great idea to schedule some talk with your school board. And I think one of the next ones should be where we are with the bond projects, you know, with the high school project. You know, start with something that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in, and maybe sometime in November do, and you could have some guests, the architects and the contractors, and field questions. And I think you probably get some good traction.
I think that'd be an excellent idea.
And you could do another, and if we did them the way we did the levy ones, you limit the people on the screen, but you can take questions either in advance or typed in during the into the chat or into Facebook during the Facebook Live. And we've had a lot of practice, so we got that down. What did you say, Mark, the other day, that we've done 74,000 Zoom meetings since the pandemic?
Seriously?
74,000. We're doing about 7,500 a day. Well, it's classes, it's meetings, it's...
Yeah.
I didn't even know what Zoom was 8 months ago. And yep.
That's a bit of a statistic.
Yep. That was
Isn't
last.
publicly
That was
traded
last
company
week's
before that?
news.
That's last week's number.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get one of the signs. It'll be like McDonald's, but it won't be how many billions are served. It'll be how many billion Zoom meetings we've had. Put that out.
We used to talk about how many copies had been made on our copiers. Our copies are way down. Our Zoom meetings, not so much. Yeah.
Well, good.
Well, why don't I come up with maybe a proposal where you guys could do some filling in of the blanks. And I think for the time being, these electronic things are really the only way that I think we're going to be able to do much outreach.
Yeah. Well, and admittedly, it is kind of easy because you get home from work, you know, and if you're having a night, you know, okay, there's a 7 o'clock community forum, you know, who wants to get up after you have dinner? But, you know, if I can sit in the comfort of my own home and just click on the computer, it's a little bit easier. You know, you don't have quite the inertia to get over.
Well, and I was thinking about the effort that went into our community meeting with kindergarten parents, the amount of staff time and everything, and the lack of participation. So if we're getting these kind of numbers for Facebook Live and for our levy presentations, I think it's fabulous.
I think people want the information. It's just so hard. I mean, your day is so full and you finally get home and you're like, oh, I just want to sit on my couch. It's just hard to get to things. So if they just click in, it's good. Speaking of like those information or tagging in onto Zoom meetings, since we've had 74 gazillion, can school board members, if a teacher is okay with it, can like a school board member come to visit a classroom? Or
you can contact Kelly probably, because Kelly or Faye, and they could help you make that happen.
Cool.
I know some teachers that would be more than happy to have that happen.
Probably lots of them would, but I would never surprise a teacher.
Right.
A school board member.
I wouldn't surprise any of them. Half of them know where I live.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a way to do that.
I'd like to do that. I think that'd be.
Yeah. Cool.
My son won't let me watch his Zoom at all. If I'm in the room, he like goes to black screen and runs.
Well, good discussion, good ideas. Thank you, everyone. That is good. So with that, we'll move on to item 4.03, which is discussion about monitoring the school board's governance policies. If you will recall, 3 years ago this fall, the school board went through 5 days of training to learn how to implement a more effective model of policy governance. At that time, we adopted a new set of approximately 35 governance policies and an annual work plan for monitoring each of those policies. When the pandemic struck, we were well into working our plan, but we recognizing the benefits. I think we were all convinced that our new governance policy or our new model had the potential to improve the way we led the district in very powerful ways. It led to some really good discussions and just found holes in things that we were doing where we could improve. Then in February 2020, the levy failed. In March, COVID-19 entered the local scene, and our priorities were forced to change. And out of necessity, we directed Superintendent Quinn and her team to refocus their efforts on dealing with the budget shortfalls and redesigning the whole education system. And we put monitoring our governance policies kind of on the back burner. Although I'm not sure this is the right time to expect the administration, actually I know this is not the right time to expect the administration to resume their work on preparing policy monitoring reports. It is probably time to talk about them and make a plan for the future. So Dr. Quinn, at our request, drafted has posted the latest draft of our work plan as a resource. It's on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And would you mind reviewing where we left off with that plan?
No, not at all. And I don't know if I've got it out here for screen sharing. I think I can share my screen. I got to open it up though. If you remember, when we started out with these policies, we said we would look at all of them. Can you see that? Am I sharing?
No.
No.
Okay. Share screen. Now I am. Now I am. We started out and we had these policies and we had a plan. And Kevin, it goes back to just exactly what you said. We were going to make this public. People would know exactly what meeting of what year that we were going to be talking about different aspects of the organization, and that you would be, we would be reporting to you on your policies, and you would be questioning us. And when we first started, we said, well, we'll do all of these in 1 year, which would have been several policies a month. And it just got to be more than, they're big multi-page reports with lots of data. So probably in January of last year, we created this schedule. Yeah, I wouldn't expect you all to read it, but we got right to,
The mission.
we got right to January, so these columns say the first draft of the report is due, who is going to do it, and then we provide it to the board, and we got right there. And we were working on early childhood readiness, and then, like you said, everything changed. So we had done these monitoring reports. We were, just to refresh your memory, there's 4 kinds of policies, but the ones that we did monitoring reports were the operational expectations and the results. So the results are all about what the outcomes we want for kids, and the operational expectations are how you expect us to run this place. So there's one on safety, there's one on financial administration, there's one on communicating with the board. And we were presenting these reports. And like you said, Kevin, there was a lot of good learning that came with the executive team in preparing the reports, but then there was a lot of good discussion with the board. This was a very, I'm not going to say this was easy. We spent a lot of time on this, but it felt very worthwhile. It felt like we were probably more in sync as a board and an executive team, and you were actually doing more leading through your values, and then that book of 6,000 policies that are we now call the administrative policies. So and if you remember, we spent a whole year actually interpreting and defining the policies, so that every word we really grappled with what those meant. So I have kind of talked to Andrew, and I talked a little bit about, is it time to resume these? I haven't necessarily talked to my team total, but is it time to, and do I redo obviously parts of this I need to redo, but because we have people who don't work here anymore. But I don't know what is it? How do we, when do you want to jump back into this?
Well, you know, Linda, as I look at the list and think about our meetings and the feedback we get every month or twice a month with our study sessions and board meetings, in some regard, we hit on a lot of these. I know they're not focused,
Right.
but we do hit on a lot of these topics. And while we're going through this pandemic, in-person, remote learning hybrid time, I'm concerned that it would be, that it would take away effort that needs to be focused on learning and how we're approaching our schools. Now, I say that and understand that we need to be having these discussions, but at the same time, I think the depth of the discussions that we have, we're covering a lot of these things. So that's just my thought. I want to be aware of how much work, double work, is being done to provide education in multiple ways to the students in our community.
I think when we talk about all the pandemic stuff and getting back to class and hybrid learning and such, that definitely needs to be done. But just like we've been talking about getting normalcy back to students and back to teachers is an important thing, I think this is an important thing of bringing it back to normal on how we govern. A lot of these reports, and I didn't have much experience with them, but seeing the data that was in them and how different students were performing and which ones weren't performing and what was what the staff or administration considered highlights or areas for improvement, and having those discussions, I think that's normalcy, and that's making sure that we keep the education, or we build the education that is the best we possibly can. So I'm in favor of getting back to them as soon as we can. But like Andrew said, there's a lot of other things that we're dealing with right now too. So as soon as we've got those.
Well, I'm like I said, I brought it up. Andrew didn't force this on me. I just said, when, because, and if we were going to get back into them, this would be my suggestion, that we don't try to play catch up with anything. We go where we are right now. So I would say we start with maybe the one, I think November 15th is too soon. We start with the one that's due to me on December 15th, 2020. It happens to be one that I need to write. Give it to you at your December meeting and see if we can start back up with this cadence. So the first one would be communicating with the board. Let me give a go at that one. And then, but I'll talk, that would be one way to do it. It seems way too overwhelming to try to loop back and, I would just pick the spot where we are. But one of the other options would be to pick out the ones you most want to know about and make a schedule that way.
Well, I think the ones, if we started with communicating with the board, science, interested in that as far as, all the students take it. Relationship with the community, that's pretty interesting too. So I think jumping in where we are now, that's fine. We'll loop back around to the others in time.
So I'm a huge believer in this process. And I am excited to think about getting back into it. I don't want to add one more thing to your plate. And I think Andrew spoke to this some. So I want it to be when you guys are ready to get back into it. And if it's December, Linda, that's fabulous. But I can also say, hey, January, February, March, that's okay too. And I do think catching up, it doesn't make any sense, but starting with what's on the list and not trying to redo the list.
That's what, I guess Faye and I were talking, or somebody, and we just said, if we just plugged in and see, I don't want to, we did such good work in getting to this point. I don't want to lose it. And I don't know. There's always a reason not to do. But I guess one of the things that hit me the other day, well, Faye and Kelly and I had to take a required class on the AWSP leadership framework and evaluating principles. And I was taking that class and I thought, okay, I know that leadership is about more than taking care of the urgent, that somehow, and that for 7 months, we have let some things go, like our improvement planning processes that we do, and this governance processes and our evaluation processes. And yeah, we can't get back into it in quite the same way, but I guess I just want us to, like Melinda said, start figuring out how to live this life we've been dealt and continuing to look at how we're going to improve our district.
Thank goodness you already have the framework.
Yeah.
You have, so it's, updating from the previous time that the report was done. So that's, I think, do we have framework for all of them?
No, we haven't been. No, we would be in new territory here, but that's okay. That's okay. I'll make a proposal on this too. My proposal is that I am going to take a look at the one that's coming up in December, which is OE 8, and take a look at that. I think it may, well, I'll take a look at it and I'll communicate with you about that one.
Okay. Communicate with us about communicating with the board.
About communicating with you. I'm not sure which one of them says we'll do an annual report. If that one says we'll do an annual report, it's probably not going to get done by December. Since you're looking at the communications department, Kelly and me. So, yeah. Okay.
Well, and I think, as Leanne said, the discussions that we had with these and the work that was being done was amazing. Blasted COVID hit and everything else, and the levy failing, it just kind of was a major bump in the road. So it'd be nice to get back, but I want to make sure that you guys aren't overwhelmed as well. I mean, there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot you're having to work with. Totally agree. We need to be not only dealing with the day-to-day, but looking to lead, but maybe we don't get quite as in depth with those reports, or, get a little bit of it. I don't know what the right answer is, but I'll leave that to you guys' judgment too. Okay, good. Next we have item 4.04, which is a discussion about the content of future school board study sessions. So this next item is to discuss future topics for future study sessions. I want to remind my fellow board members that this next special meeting we have scheduled is on November 10th. I'm wondering two things. What are your thoughts about content for the November meeting? And what are some topics you would like the board to deal with at future meetings? I would say that probably one of the items in my mind on the November 10th meeting would be, our future budget plans. Possibly, hopefully the levy will have passed at that point. And then we can talk about where we go. I don't know if we need more time or to prepare for that, or,
No,
I don't
no,
want
we,
Passes or doesn't passes, that's what November 10th should be about.
we
Yeah.
can talk about that. If it fails on November 3rd, if you remember when it failed on February 11th, I think we got together within a few days. Because but at that point we needed to plan next steps. There are no well,
no
Our
major-
next
there
steps,
are
but
next steps, but there's no remedies.
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no remedies if it
Oh,
fails.
but the next steps for the next year might have to happen very quickly as well, because
So I was going to say November 10th is probably going to have to be a reflection and action that grows out of whatever happens on November 3rd to some extent. But are there other things?
well, either in November or December, depending on what happens with the levy and other things. There are a couple items from the Bond Oversight Committee for us to discuss, just that came from a letter that they had communicated back in midsummer, I guess, that we really, just because of COVID and changes in school, we just haven't looped back to. So I'd like us to loop back and just have a conversation about that.
Okay.
And I think when the levy passes, life still isn't going to be normal within the administration or within it, because we made cuts that we had to make no matter what. And we have a lower enrollment, and that involves some cuts. And so I think talking about, I don't want people to think when the levy passes that it all goes back to customer services and you as normal. You guys have been doing a fantastic job, but there's people missing from our screen. There's people missing from that list we just looked at that carried a lot of the load, and they're gone. And so as a team, I'm thinking we should talk about priorities and where the focus needs to be. And are there things that we have to give you guys permission to let go of? Because ultimately you guys make the decision on that, but I think support from us or conversations about where those weak points are, where there's just a struggle, could be very valuable.
I would echo that, because even when we were on that schedule with those reports and the good discussions we were having, one, those reports had to be generated, which took time. And two, the discussion points and the things that were coming out of them often were, hey, we need to look at this area, we need to do this. You know, it was more work. We've got less people, more work. That combination doesn't work well. So I think Leanne's exactly right. We need to discuss priorities and how do we hit the things that are most important to the district.
Agreed.
Okay, if we didn't really get to future meetings, but it's hard to think beyond November 3rd for me right now. And whether, what meant we, but that gives enough to build the agenda, I think, for November 10th. And by then I might also have some things to report back to you on, like a plan for possible outreach, some of the other topics we talked about tonight. So
I think also a study session with part of it focused on legislative issues and what's happening at the legislator level.
Okay.
Well, and certainly in the discussion, if we're talking priorities and budget and different things that way, there's bound to be topics that'll come out of that for future study sessions, I would assume as well.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So next item on the agenda, item 5.01, is an update and discussion about the district's communications with stakeholders. We have talked about this a little bit, and given that it's already 9 o'clock or close there too, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, we try to keep our study sessions to 2 hours, and we've already used that time. Therefore, at this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Quinn if she could put this item on our next school board business meeting or special meeting, whichever place it fits, so that we can hit the stuff as far as that a little bit more. I mean, like I said, we've talked about some of it.
And you know what? It fits perfectly with priorities.
Yeah.
Because I'll put it on our November 10th meeting. I do have a report to give you, but it's not for tonight. I mean, I think it's kind of late, but just about the fact, when we did make the cuts due to the levy failure in February, we tried to follow what we heard from the community, and that was cut furthest from classrooms if you can, cut administration, cut support services. And so one of the things that's gone is the communications department. And that's where service, the service piece comes in. Our teachers in our classrooms, as well as our community, relied on a lot of the services that were provided by you. You just can't do the same work with 100 fewer people. So, and communications is one. I have a report on what we used to do and what we're currently doing, and who used to do it and who's currently doing it. And I'll put that on the November 10th, because I just want you to know the realities, of what we can do. And so thank you, Kevin. I will bring that back.
That sounds great. And it'll be good to have that report, just because that gives us the information we need when we're interacting with the community, to say, hey, this is what we had, this is what we're trying to do, and how we're doing it. So I think you're right, it does fit in with the priorities well too. Okay. So at this point, we have reached the end of our time for this special meeting of the Ferndale School Board. Thank you all for your participation. Our regular October school board meeting, our business meeting, will be next Tuesday, October 27th at 7 p.m. The agenda for that meeting is currently posted on the district website, along with information about signing up to participate by viewing the webinar. And also on board docs, if you would like to have a public comment read at that October 23rd meeting, please submit it through the portal on the district website. For those, if you haven't been at our meetings, unlike the live meetings where we did take live public comment, at this point, due to the Zoom format, we're taking it via pre-submitted. So there is a portal there to submit that, and it will be read at the meeting. So until that time, please stay safe and remember to vote before November 3rd. And I hereby declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Kevin, for covering for me.
Thank you, Kevin.
Anytime, Andrew. So.
See you next week.